Hello and welcome to A Sense of Centerville and Washington Township, your place for stories about ordinary and extraordinary places and people in the Centerville and Washington Township area. I'm Susan from Centerville-Washington History, and I look forward to hearing your story. Today, my guest is Vickie Bondi. Vickie was executive director of Centerville-Washington History for over 14 years. She began as a volunteer and joined the staff as museum assistant and later becoming Walton House Site Manager and administrative coordinator. To help promote local history, Vickie built collaborations within the community. In 2016, Vickie guided a rebranding of the organization by changing the name from Centerville-Washington Township Historical Society to Centerville-Washington History. She retired in 2019 after 24 years with the organization to spend more time with her grandchildren. Welcome, Vickie.
Thank you, Susan.
It's so nice that you could be here today. I've heard your name mentioned so many times, and it's nice to, I think we met a few times because you were friends with Peggy, and I was friends with Peggy, but I haven't had a chance to visit with you. So this is just a visit, and it's recorded as well. So we'll go ahead and get to know you a little bit better. So my first question is, how did you become involved as a volunteer for Centerville-Washington History? I know volunteers are a huge part of what we need to, any nonprofit has got to have volunteers. What motivated you to contribute to such a big part of your life to this effort?
In 1995, my husband saw an article in the Dayton Daily News that there was a program at the Walton House Museum, Centerville-Washington Township Historical Society, which we didn't even know there was such a place, which I heard that over the 24 years a lot. I didn't know there was a historical society. And it was an 1800s village trades program that was being put on by a young man by the name of Brady Kress.
Okay.
So my husband became very excited and wanted to do this. They were going to construct a small building using all 1800s hand tools. So he signed up to do that. And of course, I would go by sometimes in the evening to see what they were doing. And the director at the time was Lynn Russell, and she and I would chat and talk. And one day I received a phone call, and she asked me if I wanted to go out to lunch. And I was so excited, and I was like, oh, yes, the director of the society wants to take me out to lunch. And my son at the time was 16, and he said, oh, boy, Mom, she's going to ask you to volunteer. And I said, no, she just wants to be friends and take me out for lunch. Well, she did ask me to volunteer.
Of course.
And that started the ball rolling.
Uh-huh. So your first volunteer assignment was what? What did you do first?
My first assignment was the society newsletter. Back then, we had our little staple machines, and we would sit and fold them and staple them and stamp them with our nonprofit stamp and put the labels on by hand every month. And so that was my first assignment as a volunteer.
That's a big project.
It was.
Yeah, I know I'm tasked with that job, but I don't have to fold them and staple them, so I just put on the stickers and mail them out. It's a lot more involved for you. The second part of that question is, what motivated you to contribute such a big part of your life to this effort?
The history and the people. Once Lynn was an amazing director, and she knew what she was doing. She would task you with, would you like to help a little bit with this exhibit? And would you like to go with me? Someone's donating this to the archives. And little by little, you just got into it more and more and more. And being a history buff and learning more about Centerville and Washington Township history, you couldn't help yourself. And then the more you met the people in the organization and you realized how dedicated they were to the cause of saving the history, you wanted it. You wanted it.
Yeah, so I think that often is the case, is that you're a history buff, and once you get in it, it's like that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast. So these stories are recorded for future generations, because once it's gone, it's gone. And there's always questions that you wish you had the answer to. So preserving history. So a lot of growth in the organization during your involvement. One big thing was acquiring and renovating the Aaron Nutt Cottage. Can you talk about your involvement with that?
Yes. The cottage belonged to Lois Wilson Sizard. And Lois was one of the original founders of the Historical Society. She was part of the small group of people that fought diligently to get the society started. Back in the late 60s, buildings were being torn down to put in gas stations. At one point, Centerville had 13 gas stations up and down the strip. And there was another building that was going to be torn down. It's where the dental office is on 48 in Franklin right now. And they were just beside themselves, fighting to keep that building that was there, the Stagecoach Inn. So she was part of that, and she said, if we can get this organization going, I will give my home when I pass away, which is now the Aaron Nutt Cottage, to the Historical Society. So that's what happened. And she passed away in 2003. We, at the same time, were renting 6 rooms at 93 West Franklin next to the Walton House to store our archives in. Genealogy files and landmark files were kept in the Walton House, and everything else was stored next door. And we kept increasing. We started out with 1 room and then 2 and 3 and 4, and it made it very difficult. If people wanted to do genealogy, they'd come to the Walton House, and the curator would have to come from next door and meet them over there. And then if we were doing an exhibit, she had to bring everything from there over to Walton House and back and forth and back and forth. We had a little path at the end of the stone wall that came up behind where the chicken house is now. So there were some complications when we first got it. Some people didn't want us to have it. They said it was more than we could handle, but we were determined that we were going to have it because we knew we could move our archives and our collection there versus paying all the money we were spending
to
renting the rooms next door. Mm-hmm. So we did go back to the family and ask for a little more money than what they were giving us, and they granted us that. And then we did tons of fundraising. And then we had 3 wonderful, wonderful men, Adam Zingle Sr., Dave Huffnagel, Tom Williamson. Dave Brooker helped as well, and they did all the work to restore the building, to get it back in the shape that it needed to be in. And we moved everything there, and we thought we were going to have so much room. We filled it up immediately.
I'm sure. And those names, all those names are familiar people, and it's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
It's really well done, and I can see a lot of love and attention went into that.
Very much so. One of the fundraisers, if you notice the quilt that's on the wall across from the desk, that was made by Vickie Williamson, and we sold squares on the quilt for $15 a square to have your name there. And there was a big dinner held by 2 of our members and at their historic home, and that raised a lot of money. So we just did whatever we had to do, and it was one of the greatest things that the Historical Society did.
Wow.
We couldn't live without that place.
No, and I'm glad that we have it, and now we have, we just got it repaved, so it's ready for visitors. And
I need to come and see the new parking lot.
Yeah, I know parking lots aren't very they're very important, but people don't get excited about parking lots, but we do because we know how much effort and time it took to put that together. All right. So when we give the school tours, one of the stops the children visit is the chicken house, which is on the Walton House property. Can you talk about how that building came to be on that property? Because it wasn't originally there.
No, it was not. The parking lot behind the buildings where Panera is, a town hall, and the parking that comes down behind the buildings there on Franklin Street. When that construction was going in, our education coordinator at the time was Jean Simpson. And Jean was our first education coordinator, and she's the one that started to really build our education program. Because before Jean, we didn't have anyone who actually led the program. It was teachers that just kind of call up and say they wanted a tour, and we try to round people up to give them a tour. Mm-hmm. Jean actually turned it into a structured program and scheduled the teachers and so on and so forth. So when they started to tear all that up behind those homes there, the houses, the businesses, she happened to see this building back there. And she went and investigated, and it was a chicken house. So we had always talked to the children about it being a rural farm area, and we talked to them about everything that went on, but we didn't have anything that really explained that to them or showed that or hands-on for that. Mm-hmm. So she came to me and she said, I found this chicken house up the street. It's in really bad shape. Do you think we could move it? What? Move it? So once again, our community came to our aid, and we had Adam Zingle Sr. look at it. Lee Snyder was a township trustee at the time of Snyder Brick and Block. Mm-hmm. Lee looked at it. Jean's husband was an engineer, so George looked at it, and they're like, yeah, I think we can do this. I was like, what?
Yeah, you never think about moving a building.
No.
I mean, it happens, though.
That was built in the 1930s, probably. Mm-hmm. So they shored it up, got it as structurally sound as they could. The city insisted that we had to put in a foundation. Mm-hmm. And we were like, a foundation for a chicken house? Are you serious? But we did. We removed a section of fence at the backside of the parking lot at Walton House. Zingle Construction provided us a flatbed semi-truck. Mm-hmm. Snyder Brick and Block provided us a large, like forklift type piece of equipment to lift it. Okay. City of Centerville blocked off the road from Main Street down to Virginia Avenue, and we hoisted it up on the back of that semi and backed it in the driveway at Walton House Museum and raised the truck up and slid it off onto the foundation.
Wow.
And then Dave Huffnagel built new windows for it. Uh-huh. We had kind of like a barn raising, sort of. Uh-huh. The women painted it. Solid rock roofing, put a new roof on. And when we were all finished, we had a big picnic in the backyard, just like you would have back in 1930 when you built something. Oh. And it has been the greatest addition to our education program. The children absolutely love it. Mm-hmm. When they first started going in, and I'm assuming they're still doing it because they have over the years, we get more comments in the thank you letters about the chicken house.
Yes.
Than anything else. I mean, they just love it. And right away, people started donating chicken feeders and chicken waters and nesting boxes and so on and so forth. But it's been a great addition to us because they can feel and see something that would have actually been on a farm.
Yeah, and I think that there's like a stuffed chicken there too.
Yes,
to kind of...
we have a couple chickens and some fake eggs, and they get to stick their hand in and get an egg out, and they love it.
And Marion Sensenbaugh usually runs that tour, and Yeah, she makes it come to life.
Yes.
As many things as the kids could participate in. They try to make that happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
wonderful.
we're moving it again, but just slight difference.
Yes.
So to accommodate the new parking lot,
Right.
It's going to be shifted again. So we'll look forward to being involved in that. Hopefully. It's not as drastic though. Okay. So a favorite part of our school tours is the Schoolhouse Museum. Of course, the Chicken House is a big hit, but the Schoolhouse Museum also. So how did you get the idea for that kind of museum?
Well, here I go again. Washington Township School District had 9 one-room schoolhouses. And once again, it was just something that was not part of our structure that we could show anyone. We could show them how they lived in the early 1800s. We could show them how they lived in the 1900s. We could talk to them about farming. But the school kids, we had no way of actually showing them what it was like to go to school back then. And so for years, I kept saying, we need a one-room schoolhouse. We need a one-room schoolhouse. And of course, we have a few, but people live in them and they're not going to give us one to teach
or a business.
So that wasn't working. So after we got the Nut Cottage, I kept trying to talk the board into turning the garage
into the schoolhouse,
into a one-room schoolhouse. That wasn't working. They weren't crazy about that idea either. So the building that the museum is in originally was a visitor center gift shop. When we moved into the Ashel Wright House in 1998, there were actually 4 organizations that moved into that building. There was the Historical Society, the Landmarks Foundation, the Arts Commission, and an organization called the Four Corners, which is similar to our Heart of Centerville group.
Wow.
Yes, it was. The main room was used as a art gallery for local artists to hang their artwork in. And then we had the hearth room as the 1806. And upstairs was all offices. And so all those organizations, the main room where your offices are now was a conference room. And then all the desks for those 4 organizations were in the other room. We were cozy. The front building, which is now the schoolhouse, was a visitor center gift shop. Part of it was set up like a true visitor center. We had brochures, maps. We had things from all the businesses in town. We had a small TV video set up running our mnemonics and things like that for people to come in. The other half of the building was local artists, things on consignment. So we weren't spending any money. That was the whole idea. So we needed volunteers, each organization, and we were only open like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And each organization on Saturdays was supposed to provide a volunteer. And you know how volunteers can be. So we were struggling. And we also needed someone to get this local homemade handwork commissioned work in there to sell. And that was an issue as well. So we struggled with that for 2 or 3 years, trying to actually make this work. So eventually it just turned into a gift shop. And we were selling regular items that we felt that you would find in the time period from then. We had all the things then, and we were selling our publications. So that's how that was going. Well, that worked well for a couple of years, but it didn't make money for us. It only cost us money, and that wasn't what we needed to do either. You know what? We have a tight budget. Nonprofit. We don't want to spend money. We want to bring money in and use it for things that we need. So it wasn't going as well as we had planned. So we were going to close up the gift shop, and I said, there's my one-room school. So I presented it to the board, and they thought it was a great idea. There was a chimney that ran right through the middle of the building. We had no idea what it was for, why it was there. So we had to bring in an architect who checked it all out and said there wasn't any reason we couldn't take it out. There'd never been a fireplace there or anything else. We think it was just a flue for the furnace in the basement, which we didn't use anymore because we had, the HVAC that's on the outside. So we had that torn out, and then we painted and refinished the floor, and Ed Ross built our desks and benches for us, and the teacher's desk that's in there was donated to us, and we have Celia Elliott's organ, and the program started, and the bell outside was donated to us by board member Donna Clark, and it took off, and it's just been another great addition to our programming. Everyone loves it, but it was just something that I felt we needed to teach our community what it was like to go to school in a one-room schoolhouse.
I love that you're sharing that history. And I appreciate also you sharing these names of people, because now I know, who donated that bell. When we have the kids come, we usually ring that bell, and it's as if they're coming to school.
Exactly.
And so it's nice to have that history. The Celia Elliott, that's written on a little placard.
Yes.
by the organ, and that's a great artifact to have in there.
Absolutely.
As well. Appreciate you sharing that story.
Absolutely.
You're a wealth of information. It's very good to have. Okay. So Centerville-Washington History was founded in 1966, as we already talked about, as the Centerville Historical Society. While you were involved in leading the organization, the society celebrated both its 40th and 50th anniversary. So tell me about these celebrations and the people who began to promote history in our community.
The 40th anniversary was an amazing event. At the time, Janet Tabobin, which goes back to, Janet wasn't a founding member, but she became part of the society shortly thereafter. So we always considered Janet a founding member. Janet was a sixth grade school teacher in the school district, and then Celia Elliott was a founding member. And those two were like bread and butter, or peanut butter and jelly. They were together all the time, constantly coming up with ideas for this and that. And they thought we should have a 40th anniversary celebration. So their little minds went to work, and it was like, well, where are we gonna do this? What are we gonna do? How are we gonna do it? And they started coming up with ideas, and they thought that we should have a big old-fashioned picnic, because Centerville for years back in the 1900s had an old maid's picnic.
An old maid's picnic.
That's what they called it, the old maid's picnic. All the girls that weren't married, and they probably were 19 years old, but it was the old maid's picnic.
Oh, goodness.
There are pictures in the archives of the old maid's picnic that they held every year. So they decided it would be neat if we had a big picnic. Where are we going to do this? Well, Ed and Susan Ross had just purchased their property, the Ida Weller estate. I think they had been there maybe a year. They had not been there very long. And Janet says, well, we'll just ask them if we can have it there. And we're like, Janet,
we don't even know that.
We don't know these people. And you had to know Janet. And she's like, I'll ask them, and that was Janet.
Undeterred.
Yes, that was Janet. And so she went and she asked them, and Susan said, sure, which them now, and you can imagine that they would have said
they're very generous.
Yes. So we had an amazing, amazing event at their property. there was an old wagon that is now used in the parade that was in one of the barns. We pulled that out. Everybody brought a covered dish. Ed rounded up friends that grilled hamburgers and hot dogs all day. We had to have porta-johns brought in.
Oh, yeah.
We had music entertainment from the time period, kind of. We had a banjo group, and we had, I don't know what all we had, ukuleles, you name it. We had it all day. Every 45 minutes, we switched to a new group. We had a big tent set up for people. We had bales of hay all over the place, for people to sit on. It was an old-fashioned. Janet dressed as Ida Weller and got up on the wagon and gave us a big presentation as Ida Weller and what it was like at her home there. We had a gentleman that had a 1920s Model T Ford that he brought and gave people rides. It was just a fabulous, fabulous day. And we still, at that time, we had 6 of our founding members. So they were there. And it was like a dream. So many people came, and it was just something that had never been done before. So it was beautiful. It was really beautiful.
I love that. Yeah, it's as our community gets bigger and bigger, it's hard to keep those small town traditions.
Yes.
But it's a fun thing to remember those kinds of things and to feel connected. And that's what we really want in organizations is to feel connected and part of something larger than yourself.
The 50th anniversary, we had a big picnic at Stubbs Park. And we had lost some of our founding members. 10 years later, we didn't have quite as many. A lot of our members were gone by then. The attendance wasn't as large, and the music was a little different. I think we had the Fries or somebody. It was a different feel at the vibe. 50th anniversary, but nevertheless, we still had it. A celebration, and we had various things throughout the year. We had a nice big exhibit, and it was still a celebration for 50 years of an organization.
And it should be celebrated. That's
Absolutely.
Wonderful to be able to do that. And I love that you mentioned Janet Tobabin. I've watched a lot of her videos because they were filmed in the area that we're using our podcast for, and she was responsible for being the host of the mnemonic intervals for a lot of years, decades. And she knew history inside and out. And so I appreciate her, her background and learning how to be a host of my own. I don't have the history, down, but I'm learning as I go. So thank you for sharing her name as well.
Absolutely.
She should be remembered, and she got a lot done as well. Okay. So is there an exhibit that you remember especially fondly?
Well, there are a few.
That's good.
2006, yes. We celebrated the 200th birthday of the Asheville Wright House.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So that was a big year for us. Oh my gosh, we did so much that year. We had a huge exhibit inside. We borrowed things from Dayton history, from the Wright brothers, because Asheville Wright and Orville and Wilbur. The Dayton Bicycle Club was actually doing a ride, and they were doing the ride. I don't know if you're familiar with the ride that the Wright brothers took on their bikes.
Yes, it was written up, and that it was up through, up the hill, and then down to
Maine and up Far Hills and so on and so forth. Well, they were actually retracing that ride. So we planned, got with them, and they planned to do that on the day that we were having a big celebration at the Asheville Wright House. So they started out downtown and then ended up at Asheville Wright, and then they went on to Miamisburg. But we had artist Donna Clark. She was an art teacher at Hither Green when it was a school. she got with Hither Green Senior Center. They did watercolors of our stone buildings and things downtown that we sold off that day. We had a huge cake. We were all dressed in that time period. And the bicyclist showed up right on time. And it was just an amazing day, but it went on all year long because that's what we did in the parade. We had the wagon and so on and so forth. So it was just a great time. And it went on for like a year. I mean, it was a year.
A year of events and, and celebration.
Yes.
And it's great. I always think that events should carry on.
It
and
did.
I appreciate you mentioning Donna Clark as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was Donna who created the little shadow boxes that are in the Schoolhouse Museum right now. And there's also a Christmas one that I put out at Christmas time. But those are always delightful that she shared her talents, and it's something that's been so enduring over the years.
Yes.
And yeah, I've not met her, but I gave her a call and told her how much we appreciate.
Oh, I'm sure she was thrilled to hear from you.
Yeah.
I'm sure she was.
Okay, so Centerville-Washington History has always been involved with the Americana Festival and Parade. Can you talk more about being involved with this community event?
The Americana Festival and Parade is something that the Historical Society has been a part of ever since it started, which was great for the Walton House because we could have it open. People were coming in. It was wonderful. So that was a good thing for us. And then at some point they decided to close it off. The festival itself actually came that way. Oh. Then they switched it to go down Main Street. Mm-hmm. So we always had a booth. We always had something set up, to go along with that. We always had a float in the parade. Even if we were just walking in the parade, we always had someone in the parade representing the Historical Society. But once we got the Asheville Wright House, that was a game changer. People weren't coming in the Walton House as much as they had been prior to that because the parade would go by and then everyone left to go uptown to the street fair. So the Walton House was kind of getting left behind, but now we had the Asheville Wright House right there on Main Street, right in the middle of everything. Mm-hmm. So that changed everything. And so we were seeing a good 500, 600 people a day during the Americana Festival. So it was just a dream come true to get people in and have our booth out front. I mean, there's nothing better than being able to stand out there and tell people about our history and for people to say, oh, I've always wondered what was in that building. Oh, I didn't know there was a museum in there. I didn't know we could go in there. Oh, come on, honey. I want to go in here and see what they have. So, I mean, it's been a real dream come true for us. And I don't know where they have all of them now, but we have won several awards over the years for our floats that go into the parade. I don't know if they're in the attic of the Walton House. I'm not sure where they're at. But we always try to keep in keeping with the theme of the parade. And I think we're about the only ones that ever did.
So you won awards.
Because the majority of them are organizations and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and so on and so forth, or the Township is just about the Township or whatever. But we always try to do ours according to whatever the theme was. Of course, most of the time when we went by, people didn't even know what we were doing or paying any attention, but we had a ball, and it was just something that we did for years. One year we had popcorn in the Walton House lawn. One year we had donuts. We just did whatever we had to do. But it's just the most exciting time. People come, and that's what we're all about. It's people.
Yeah. And
it spreads the word better than anything else we can do.
Yeah, I think that's really true. You mentioned a couple of things that I have some follow-up questions on because, so the Walton House is what we had first.
Yes.
And then the city actually owns the Asheville Wright building, but we we
lease that.
We lease it. We have that available to us, and then the then the Aaron Nutt cottage. So yes, we actually have both of our buildings. The Walton House and the Ashel Wright building open, because the Americana then has now extended to
that's been
to
since
Walton
I
House.
retired. Yes.
So that's nice that people can tour both
Yes.
museums during that time.
Yes, it is.
And
That's wonderful.
I echo what you say, is people often they'll like, oh, I didn't know this was open. Oh, I didn't realize it was a museum. Oh, this is so cute. This is so adorable. Why didn't I ever know? These things happen all the time.
Yes.
And so we're really glad to be able to share those buildings with the community. So thanks for sharing.
I always said if we just had a nickel for every time someone said to us, oh, I didn't know there was a historical society, or I didn't know there was we would have had no issues with fundraising at all.
Yeah, and that's part of, why we present this podcast, because it kind of then shares the history, and then being open on big holidays like this. It's really just trying to share the history with
absolutely.
the community. In 2009, at Stubbs Park, the Society hosted the Ohio Chautauqua. Can you tell more about this event and how it came about?
That was the biggest undertaking.
And you have some big undertakings here. Moving a house, renovating a house.
That was... I look back at that sometimes and I think, what in the world was I thinking? Once again, Celia Elliott came to me, and she had read an article in a magazine, the Ohio Humanities Council, and they're an organization that help promote historical societies, museums, anything related to history and such. She read this article about Chautauquas, and that they put on Chautauquas every year in different towns. And she thought that was something that we should do, that was just the greatest thing ever. Vickie, we need to do this. We need to do this. This is great. I don't even know what a Chautauqua is.
Well, I'm sure many of our listeners don't. So let's explain what a Chautauqua is.
Chautauqua started back in the late 1800s and went through the early 1930s. And they were educational institutes for adults. And they were more like a summer camp. You would go for art and music and literature, and they would bring in speakers from all over the place that were supposed to be of the best of the best. And they mainly started out in New York, but at the same time, they were more of a social type event. So they started out in New York, and then they started kind of traveling around. And they would set up camps in different towns and so on and so forth. Now, we had an actual Chautauqua in Miamisburg that was there every summer. And they did start to change a little bit where children would go to Chautauqua for the summer. It was a summer camp. Mm-hmm. So they changed over the years, but that's pretty much what they were. So Celia comes to me with this idea of doing this Chautauqua. And we were like, okay, so we start to investigate. Well, my goodness. You have to apply. You have to be accepted. You have to prove that you can do this. And it's quite a process. There's a tent that holds like 500 people. So you have to show them you have the place for the tent. You have to show them that you have security. You have to show them that you have emergency medical help, that you have a backup spot. So if it's raining, you don't have it in the tent, you have it someplace else. They do afternoon classes, so you have to have a location to do the afternoon classes. You have to have $2,500 to give them to do this. And the list goes on and on and on and on. So I'm like, we can't do this. I can't do this. But we did. We broke attendance records for Ohio Humanities Chautauqua.
Wow.
I spent a year and a half working on this. You apply the year before you're going to actually have the event. And I promoted it because they told me we would have a red and white striped tent, and we had a blue and white striped tent. So I spent a year telling people come and look for the red and white striped tent, and we had a blue and white striped tent.
There's always something that goes wrong.
We set it up in the soccer field behind the police station, which turned out to be a wonderful location because right across was a playground. So a good place for children to go. We had free popcorn and free balloons for the kids, just like you could imagine back in 1910 or something, and that's what it looked like. Each night was a different performance by an actor, and each afternoon at the library was a different class held by one of the actors about a different particular subject. Not the same actor that was going to perform that night. So you had a choice. You could go that afternoon and see one of them, and then that night go see a different one. So our performers did, I wrote them down because I did not want, we had Thomas Edison, Andrew Carnegie, George Washington Carver, and Alexander Graham Bell. So for the first half hour, we had music. We had groups that came in and performed. And then at 7 o'clock, our performers showed up and did in-person reenactment.
Historical reenactment.
Yes, of this person. And they were amazing.
How'd you find these people?
They are provided through Ohio Humanities.
Oh, okay.
So that night, the opening night, there were so many people there, they overflowed out of the tent into the lawn around the tent. There were so many people.
So good promotion.
And that's where we were blessed, because we didn't know how we were going to get the word out about such an event like this. I received a phone call one day from a gentleman named Bob Yeck. And Bob was a big community supporter. He was part of Centerville-Washington Foundation, and just an amazing man. I've known him for years. He called me one day and he said, Vickie, I understand you have something that you're trying to put together, and a Chautauqua. And of course, nobody really knew what it was. Every time we talked to someone, we had the discussion about what a Chautauqua was. And his mother and father had set up a foundation years ago, the William and Dorothy Yeck Foundation. They were huge supporters of the library and other things in our community. Yes. And so he said, I would like to have lunch with you and discuss this more. So we did. He told me to put a budget together and bring it back to him. I did. And he told me to go back and redo the budget and ask him for more.
Wow.
And so I did. And they sponsored us for $25,000. And we spent the year putting newspaper articles, anything that we could possibly think of to promote that. So we did Chautauqua, and we had over 2,000 people in attendance.
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
The board said, we will never do this again because you tried to kill us.
It was too much work.
Although Bob did call me and ask me if we could do it again. And I said, I can't get him to.
Yeah, and I think that is key, is you have to be able to do what your group can do.
But it was absolutely a once in a lifetime amazing thing that I don't know if we could have pulled it off again or not.
Yeah. That's interesting to think of people being hungry for history.
Yes.
You know, you don't really think history is like exciting, but...
And the community was begging us to do it again.
Yeah.
They enjoyed it so much. The second night, it rained so hard. I mean, it absolutely was a downpour. Everything outside was mud. And we still had 125 people show up. So that kind of says something about how it went.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's I think I may have attended, but I don't know, it was a long time ago. I tend to like history things. Probably drag my kids to stuff like that, you know. Okay, so we're on our last question. Then I want you to share a little bit about what you've been doing since. So what were your favorite experiences about being a part of the Centerville-Washington History over the years?
My favorite, absolutely most enjoyable, the people. I love all the people that I met, all the people that impacted my life, all the children, it's just about the people. Mm-hmm. And the Celia Elliott's and the Janet Tobobbins and Martha Boyce, the mentors, the people who taught me. I was a housewife, you know, I didn't know anything, and it showed in the beginning. But those people took me under their wing, and we did it. We made a lot, and we came a long way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're I can tell that you're very tenderhearted about it, that it is about people and building relationships, which is something I can tell. I'll just share that when we walked in this building, the hugs and kisses that Vickie received and gave, it testifies that you are a person who brings people together. And I think in leadership, you know, that's a key point, to be able to lead an organization and have love as you do it.
Well, thank you.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate you being here. And as you gather your, I didn't know we would cry today, but I'm glad it's a happy memory for you.
It is an amazing.
Yeah.
It was very hard to leave.
Yeah.
Very hard.
But let's talk about what you've been doing since, because there's wonderful things that happened after as well.
Well, you know, it was weird because we picked an odd time to leave in December 2019, and then January 2020, we went to Hilton Head, where we have a condo, and then March 2020, COVID hit, and we were locked in our house for 2 years. So it was kind of like, well, we did this wrong, and I hope we like each other, because we can't go anywhere or do anything. And so that kind of put a chink in everything, because we couldn't go see our grandkids. We couldn't travel. We couldn't do all these elaborate plans that we had, you know, when we're going to retire and go do this and go do that. And then COVID slapped us right up beside the face. And so that was a little
disheartening. Yeah.
You better believe it. But after COVID, we have been going to see our kids. We were down in Hilton Head 3 months in the winter and 3 months in the fall, and then we're back home in the summertime seeing our kids. And we really haven't traveled yet like we would like to. I'll tell you, it seems like we end up going to Chicago to our kids and going to Columbus to our kids. And we keep saying we're going to go out west and we want to go to Italy, but it's like, well, we're going up there, we're going up here, we're going up. And so next year is our 45th wedding anniversary. And we have told the kids that we are not, we are planning these trips and we are doing them. So hopefully that is going to happen.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because Italy's one of the places I say we're going to go, and we were going to go in the fall, and I have a new grandbaby coming in the fall, which is lovely. I'm so happy for it, but that Italy is going to have to wait.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but not for you because it's happening.
Yes, it's happening. It's happening.
Yes. Well, anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to make sure to share?
You know, Susan, it was such an exciting time in my life, and so many people, and just as from what we discussed today, you know, we did so much, and there are so many people that mean so much to me, and if I start trying to thank people, I will miss a lot of people, and it does make me feel good when you say you hear my name a lot, because I'm always afraid that maybe I didn't do enough and I won't be remembered. So I just want to thank everybody in this organization for all the help and everything that they did for me over the years. And I want them all to know how much they mean to me. Oh,
that's lovely. Thank you so much for doing that, because I'm sure you are very loved. In the people that I know who know you, there's just so many wonderful things that they say about you, and
Good.
Appreciate you being here today, still
Thank
contributing
you.
to sharing the history with our community.
Thank you.
And we look forward to your Italy, travel log afterwards.
And if people don't recognize me, it's because my hair's not red anymore.
I know. When you came out of the car, I was like, no red hair. You've gone grayish like me. Yours is more like blonde, though. All right. Well, it's time to wrap up. But thank you to MVCC for helping to produce this podcast, and to my guest, Vickie Bondi. If you have an interesting story about Centerville-Washington Township, please contact Centerville-Washington History. Please also come visit our museums in Uptown Centerville Tuesday through Friday, 12 o'clock to 4 p.m. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and watch for upcoming events posted on our website, CentervilleWashingtonHistory.org. And please consider joining as a member or volunteering. And have a great day. Bye-bye.